I'm Natalie Parker, 28, standing in my small Chicago apartment staring at a pile of birthday decorations for my dad's big day. My hands shake as I untangle a string of lights, not from excitement but dread. My sister is coming, and her sharp tongue always cuts deeper than I expect. Growing up, she would roll her eyes at my quiet life, mocking my boring job while flaunting her glitzy downtown success. Last time we met, she sneered, "You'll never measure up," and I swallowed it to keep the peace. Now I'm bracing for worse. I can already picture her strutting in, ready to humiliate me in front of everyone we love. At Dad's birthday, she didn't just cross a line, she pushed me to the ground, pointed, and spat. "Your place is on the floor." The room erupted in laughter. I whispered softly, "I understand," and quietly walked away. Weeks later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. My parents, my sister, even her husband, all begging to see me. But I left only one message, just 5 words, sharp and cold. "Look down at the floor. If you were in that situation like me, would you walk away quietly or fight back on the spot?" Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your answer. A few weeks before Dad's birthday, I was sipping coffee in my modest Chicago apartment, scrolling through LinkedIn on my laptop. I don't often check my sister Diane's profile. Her posts are a relentless showcase of self-praise, but curiosity tugged at me that morning. Diane Parker, my older sister, had just shared an update that hit like a slap. A photo of her in a polished downtown office captioned, "Another $1 million deal closed." Not everyone can keep up, especially those stuck in dead-end office jobs. The jab was unmistakable. She meant me, the office worker she's always belittled. My stomach twisted, but I kept scrolling, hoping it was a one-off. It wasn't. Another post from last month showed Diane at a glitzy gala with her husband Stephen Walsh grinning beside her. The caption stung deeper. "Surrounded by winners, not wannabes who think pushing papers is a career." I set my coffee down, the mug cold in my hands. Diane had no idea I wasn't just some clerk. For years, I'd been a financial investor, quietly funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into her stockbroking firm through anonymous channels. My investments kept her company afloat during rocky markets times she'd bragged about outsmarting the crash. I never told her, or anyone, not even my dad James, who raised me to value the work over the spotlight. But Diane's words on LinkedIn, so public and cruel, brought back that old ache of being invisible in her eyes. Growing up, Diane would scoff at my quiet ways, my choice to live simply in our suburban neighborhood. "You're wasting your potential," she'd say, her voice dripping with pity. Now she was broadcasting it to her entire network. I clicked deeper into Diane's profile, my pulse quickening. A comment from a family friend, Margaret, our neighbor, popped up. "Wow, Diane, you're killing it. Your sister must be so proud." Diane's reply made my jaw clench. Natalie's too busy with her little desk job to notice. I wanted to scream. Instead, I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I remembered a Christmas years ago when Diane laughed in front of our cousins, saying I'd never amount to much. I'd brushed it off to keep Dad happy, but it hurt. My mother, Linda, gone years now, would have hated seeing us like this. Diane's taunts weren't new, but airing them online felt like a betrayal. I'd been her silent lifeline, pouring money into her firm to save her employees, not her ego. Yet she still saw me as less. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could comment, reveal the truth about my investments, and watch Diane squirm. But that wasn't my style. I'd learned her need to one-up me stemmed from her own insecurities. Instead, I messaged my business partner, Richard Coleman, confirming our next investment move, another boost to Diane's firm, hidden as always. I told myself it was for her team, not her. But her posts kept gnawing at me. I scrolled through more comments, some from Dad's old friends praising Diane's success, oblivious to her cruelty. One hit hard: "Diane, your family's lucky to have you leading the way." Leading, I'd been carrying her company for years. I closed my laptop, my chest tight. Diane's posts weren't just boasts. They were a public challenge, daring me to step out of my shadow. But I didn't want to play her game. Dad's pride in my quiet choices meant more than Diane's approval ever could. Still, her taunts were growing bolder, and with his birthday looming, I sensed trouble brewing. I grabbed my phone to text Dad about the party menu, determined to focus on him. A few weeks after seeing Diane's venomous LinkedIn posts, I found myself at a sleek Chicago restaurant, its dim lighting and clinking glasses doing little to ease my nerves. Dad had insisted on a family dinner to catch up before his birthday, and I'd agreed, hoping to keep things civil. Diane sat across from me, her designer dress catching the candlelight with Stephen, her husband smirking beside her. Dad, ever the peacemaker, tried to steer the conversation toward old memories of our childhood in the suburbs. But Diane wasn't here for nostalgia. She leaned forward, her wine glass glinting, and fixed her eyes on me. "So, Natalie," Diane said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter still slaving away at that little desk job of yours. The table went quiet. I gripped my fork, my face burning, but I forced a smile. "It's fine," I said softly, not wanting to upset Dad. Diane's laugh was cold. "Fine. Oh, honey, you're such a failure compared to me. I close million-dollar deals while you're what, filing papers?" Stephen chuckled, egging her on, and I felt the eyes of nearby diners on us. I wanted to tell her the truth, that my investments were the backbone of her precious firm, but I bit my tongue. Dad's shoulders slumped, his face tight with discomfort. Diane wasn't done. She waved her hand, dismissing my silence. "You know, some people are just meant for small lives," she said loud enough for the next table to hear. "I mean, look at me. I'm carrying this family's name forward." My chest tightened, but I kept my eyes on my plate, refusing to give her the reaction she craved. Dad tried to change the subject, mentioning his plumbing work, but Diane cut him off. "Oh, Dad, let's not bore everyone with that," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I saw the hurt flicker in his eyes, and it took everything in me not to snap. Then came the bill, $400 for Diane's extravagant orders of wine and steak. She slid it toward Dad with a smug smile. "You got this right. I mean, I'd pay, but I'm saving for our new condo." Stephen laughed again, and I felt a surge of anger. Dad, ever proud, pulled out his wallet, his hands trembling slightly. I wanted to stop him, to tell Diane she was out of line, but I knew it would only make things worse. "I'll cover it," Dad said quietly, his voice strained. Diane leaned back, satisfied, while I swallowed my rage. She'd humiliated us both, and, for what to prove, she was better. As the waiter took the payment, Diane leaned toward me again. "You should thank me for showing you how real success looks," she whispered, her words like a blade. I met her gaze, my voice steady, despite the storm inside. "I see it clearly," I said low enough for only her to hear. She smirked, thinking she'd won, but I was already replaying her words, her arrogance in my mind. I'd spent years propping up her company, saving her from collapse, and she dared to call me a failure. The thought of Dad's quiet sacrifice for her ego made my blood boil. I excused myself to the restroom, splashing cold water on my face to calm down. Diane's cruelty wasn't new, but this public display felt different, bolder, more vicious. I thought of Linda, our mother, who'd always preached kindness over competition. She'd be ashamed of Diane now. As I stared at my reflection, I realized this dinner wasn't just a one-off. Diane was escalating, and Dad's birthday was next. I dried my hands, my resolve hardening. I'd keep the peace for Dad's sake, but Diane was testing my limits. A few days after that humiliating dinner, I was in my Chicago apartment sorting through birthday decorations for Dad when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Diane standing there, her arms crossed, eyes blazing. She didn't wait for an invitation, pushing past me into my living room. "We need to talk, Natalie," she snapped, her voice sharp as ever. I shut the door, my heart sinking. I'd hoped to avoid her until Dad's birthday, but Diane clearly had other plans. She spun around, her designer heels clicking on my hardwood floor, and pointed a manicured finger at me. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing you are?" Diane said, her tone venomous. "Dad fawns over you like you're some saint while I'm out there making this family look good." I stood frozen, her words hitting like a wave. She was furious not because of anything I'd done, but because Dad loved me, maybe more than her. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm not trying to compete with you, Diane," I said evenly. She laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in my small space. "Compete? You're not even in my league. Your pathetic little life, your cheap apartment, your boring job. It's a disgrace to our family name." I clenched my fists, her words slicing through me. She had no clue I'd been bankrolling her company, pouring hundreds of thousands into her firm to keep it afloat. I'd kept it secret not for glory, but to protect her employees, and honestly, to avoid her gloating. But now, Diane stood in my home, tearing me down. "You need to stop acting like you're something special," she continued, pacing. "Dad's birthday is coming, and I won't let you ruin it with your sad, simple act. Change your ways, or you're not invited." Her threat landed like a punch. Not invited to Dad's birthday. The one I'd been planning for weeks. I thought of Dad, how he'd always defended me, even when Diane belittled me. I remembered a time years ago when Linda, our mother, was still alive. She'd caught Diane mocking my modest dreams and pulled her aside, saying, "Your sister's heart is worth more than your pride." Diane hadn't listened then, and she wasn't listening now. I wanted to tell her the truth, that her success rested on my investments, but I held back. She'd only twisted into another way to claim superiority. Instead, I met her gaze. "I'm not the one embarrassing anyone," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. Diane scoffed, tossing her hair. "Keep telling yourself that. But if you show up to Dad's party looking like a nobody, don't expect a seat at my table." She stormed toward the door, pausing to deliver one last jab. "You're lucky I even bother with you." The door slammed behind her, leaving me standing in the silence of my apartment. My hands shook as I picked up a string of birthday lights, trying to focus on Dad. Diane's words stung, but her threat cut deeper. She thought she could control me, erase me from Dad's day. I thought of Richard, my business partner, and the investments I'd made in Diane's firm. Maybe it was time to rethink that support. I sat down, staring at the decorations. Diane's visit wasn't just a tantrum, it was a line in the sand. She'd always seen me as less, but now she was trying to push me out entirely. I wouldn't let her ruin Dad's birthday, but I also wouldn't let her walk over me anymore. I grabbed my notebook to jot down party details, my resolve strengthening. A few days after Diane's confrontation, I stood in Dad's suburban Chicago home, taping streamers to the living room walls. The scent of his favorite meatloaf baking in the oven filled the air, a small comfort as we prepared for his birthday. Dad shuffled in carrying a box of old party hats, his smile warm but tired. "You're doing too much, Natalie," he said, setting the box down. I shook my head, tying a balloon to a chair. "It's your day, Dad. I want it perfect." But my chest tightened with worry. Diane's threat to exclude me from the party lingered, and I feared she'd turn this celebration into another stage for her cruelty. Dad noticed my silence and sat beside me, his calloused hands folding a paper tablecloth. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, unable to hide my unease. "Diane's been intense lately. I'm scared she'll ruin this for you." Dad sighed, his eyes distant. "She's always been competitive, even as a kid. But you're my rock, Natalie. Don't let her dim your light." His words hit deep, stirring memories of Linda, our mother. She'd loved birthdays, always making them about family, not show. I remembered her baking Dad's cake one year, laughing as she smeared frosting on my nose. That warmth felt so far away now, with Diane's venom poisoning everything. I taped another streamer, my hands trembling. Diane's recent words, calling my life a disgrace, echoed in my mind. I hadn't told Dad about her visit, not wanting to burden him. He'd always tried to keep us close despite her jabs. "You think she'll behave tomorrow?" I asked, half hoping. Dad chuckled, but it was hollow. "I'll talk to her. She's my daughter too, but she needs to learn respect." His faith in Diane felt naive, but I didn't argue. I'd spent years propping up her company with secret investments, yet she saw me as nothing. The thought of her disrupting Dad's day made my stomach churn. We moved to the kitchen where I checked the meatloaf while Dad arranged photo frames on the table, pictures of us as kids, Linda beaming beside us. "Your mom would be proud of you," he said, holding up a photo from my 10th birthday. "She always said you had a quiet strength." I smiled, but my throat tightened. Linda's values, kindness, humility, were what I clung to even as Diane mocked them. I wondered what she'd think of Diane now, parading her arrogance, while I silently kept her firm afloat. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task. "Let's make this the best party yet," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. As we hung a banner, Dad hummed an old tune Linda used to sing. It steadied me, reminding me why I was here. This party wasn't just for Dad, it was for the family we used to be. But Diane's threat loomed large. Would she really try to push me out? I pictured her storming in her husband Stephen, trailing behind, ready to belittle me again. I hadn't told Richard, my business partner, about her latest stunt, but I knew he'd urge me to stand my ground. I wanted to believe I could keep the peace, but Diane was testing my limits. I straightened a crooked streamer, my resolve growing. No matter what she did, I'd protect Dad's day. I pulled out a notepad to finalize the guest list, my pen moving swiftly. The day of Dad's birthday arrived, and the family home buzzed with laughter and chatter. Streamers hung brightly, the meatloaf sat steaming on the table, and guests, neighbors, old friends mingled with drinks in hand. I moved through the crowd, refilling plates, my eyes darting toward the door. Diane hadn't shown up yet, but her threat to exclude me still echoed. Dad caught my gaze, giving me a reassuring nod as he chatted with Margaret, our neighbor. I forced a smile, hoping the night would stay peaceful. But when Diane strutted in, Stephen trailing behind her, my stomach knotted. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, locking onto me with a smirk that promised trouble. She made her way over her heels, clicking loudly, drawing attention. "Nice little party," Natalie Diane said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you spend all week on this?" I ignored her, adjusting a centerpiece, but she stepped closer, her presence suffocating. Dad tried to intervene, raising his glass for a toast, but Diane cut him off. "Oh, let's not pretend this is anything special," she said loud enough for heads to turn. I clenched my jaw, focusing on a stack of napkins. I'd promised Dad I'd keep the peace, but Diane was already testing me. As we sat for dinner, I took a seat near Dad, hoping to stay out of her line of fire. The guests laughed over old stories, and for a moment it felt like the family Linda had loved. But then Diane stood her chair, scraping, and pointed at me. "You know, Natalie, you don't belong at this table," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. Before I could respond, she reached over and yanked my chair back. I stumbled, crashing to the floor, my hand scraping the hardwood. The room erupted in laughter, Stephen's loudest of all, as Diane loomed over me. "Your place is on the floor," she spat, her words sharp as knives. The guests' laughter grew, some assuming it was a cruel joke, but Dad's face paled, his hands gripping the table. I looked up at Diane, her smug grin burning into me. Every moment I'd held back, her LinkedIn jabs, her restaurant taunts, her threats at my apartment flooded back. I'd poured years of silent support into her company, keeping her afloat, and this was my reward. My face burned, but I stood slowly, brushing off my dress. "I understand," I whispered, my voice steady despite the humiliation. The laughter died down, replaced by awkward murmurs. Diane raised an eyebrow, thinking she'd won, but I locked eyes with her for a moment before turning away. I grabbed my purse and walked out the door, clicking shut behind me. Outside, the cool Chicago air hit my face. I leaned against the porch railing, my hands shaking. Diane's words weren't just cruel, they were the final straw. I thought of Linda, how she'd taught me to rise above pettiness. But this wasn't pettiness anymore. It was malice. I'd spent years funneling money into Diane's firm, believing I was helping her employees, protecting Dad's pride. No more. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Richard, my business partner, start the process to pull our investments from Diane's company. I hit send, my heart pounding. That decision wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming my dignity. I glanced back at the house, the glow of the party spilling through the windows. Dad deserved better than Diane's spectacle. I knew she'd feel the consequences soon, but for now, I needed space. I walked to my car, my steps firm. Moments after I stepped outside, the front door of Dad's house swung open and Richard, my business partner, hurried toward me. His face was flushed, his suit slightly rumpled from a late flight into Chicago. "Natalie, I got your message," he said, catching his breath. I couldn't let this night end without setting things straight. I frowned, confused, as he gestured toward the house. "Come back inside. There's something everyone needs to hear." My heart raced. Richard wasn't one for theatrics, but his urgency pulled me back through the door, the party's chatter still lively within. The living room was warm with candlelight and laughter, though the sting of Diane's cruelty lingered in my chest. Dad stood near the cake looking worried while Diane and Stephen held court near the fireplace, her voice carrying over the crowd. Guests' friends like Margaret and Dad's old co-workers sipped drinks, unaware of the storm brewing. Richard cleared his throat, his presence commanding attention. "I apologize for interrupting." He began, his voice steady but firm. "But there's something you all need to know about Natalie Parker." Heads turned and Diane's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a skeptical smirk. I froze, my pulse hammering. Richard had never been to one of our family gatherings before, and I hadn't expected him to show up tonight. "Natalie has been more than a friend or colleague to me," he continued, scanning the room. "She's a financial genius, a silent investor who's saved countless jobs, especially at one company in this very room." Whispers rippled through the guests. Diane's smirk faltered, and Stephen shifted uncomfortably, his glass clinking against a table. I wanted to stop Richard, to keep my secret safe, but his words pressed on, relentless. "For years, Richard said, Natalie has funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars into Diane's stockbroking firm anonymously through our partnership. Her investments kept it afloat during market crashes, saving employees and their families." The room fell silent, Forks pausing mid-bite. Diane's face drained of color, her eyes darting to me, then back to Richard. Without Natalie's funds, Diane's million-dollar deals would have crumbled long ago. Gasps echoed, Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, and Dad's eyes widened, his expression a mix of pride and shock. Diane stammered, her voice sharp. "That's ridiculous. My firm's success is mine." Stephen placed a hand on her arm, but she shook it off, her cheeks flushing. Richard raised a hand, calm but unyielding. "I have the records, Diane. Every transfer, every rescue, Natalie's work. She never wanted credit, but I won't let her be humiliated for it." The guests stared, some whispering, others gaping at me. I stood rooted, my throat tight, as memories of Linda's lessons in humility flashed through my mind. I'd hidden my role to avoid this exact spotlight, but Richard's truth had torn that veil away. Dad stepped forward, his voice soft. "Is this true, Natalie?" I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I did it for the people who work there. Dad, not for her." Diane's laugh was brittle, desperate. You're nobody. This is a lie." But the guests' murmurs grew louder, their faces shifting from amusement to awe. Stephen's jaw tightened, his usual smugness gone. Richard turned to me, his voice softening. "You deserve better than being pushed to the floor, Natalie. You're the one who's been holding things together." The weight of Diane's words, her cruel taunts, her public shaming lifted slightly, replaced by a strange mix of relief and exposure. I'd never wanted this moment, but Richard's arrival had changed everything. The guests began to approach me, their voices warm with questions and praise, while Diane stood frozen, her empire of pride cracking. Dad pulled me into a hug, his arm steady. "I always knew you were special," he whispered. I managed a small smile, but my mind was already racing toward what came next. Diane's world was about to shift, and I wasn't sure I was ready to see it fall. I stepped outside for air, needing a moment to breathe. Weeks after Dad's birthday, I sat in my Chicago apartment, the city skyline muted through my window. The news had broken. Diane's stockbroking firm had collapsed. Without my investments pulled after her public humiliation of me, her company couldn't weather the latest market dip. Headlines buzzed about layoffs, clients fleeing, and Diane's name tied to failure. I felt a pang of guilt not for her, but for the employees I'd tried to protect. My phone vibrated with messages, but I ignored them, sipping coffee, trying to focus on work. Then my doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I opened the door to find Diane, Stephen, and Dad standing there. Diane's usual polish was gone. Her hair was messy, her eyes red. Stephen looked deflated, his tie loose while Dad's face carried a quiet plea. "Can we come in?" Dad asked, his voice soft. I stepped aside, my chest tight, knowing this wasn't a casual visit. They settled in my living room, the silence heavy. Diane spoke first, her voice cracking. "Natalie, we didn't know how much you did for us. I'm sorry for everything." Stephen nodded, his usual arrogance absent. "We were wrong to treat you that way." He said, his words stiff but earnest. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, their apologies ringing hollow. I'd spent years enduring Diane's taunts, her LinkedIn posts, her restaurant mockery, her threats at my apartment, her cruel spectacle at Dad's party. Each memory stung, and their regret felt like too little, too late. Dad stepped forward, his hands clasped. "Natalie, please. Your family. Can't we find a way to move past this? For Linda's sake?" His mention of our mother, her values of unity, hit hard. I saw the pain in his eyes, the weight of a fractured family, but my own wounds were too raw. "Diane," I said, my voice steady, "you called me a failure, a disgrace. You pushed me to the floor in front of everyone." Her face crumpled, but I pressed on. "I gave everything to keep your company alive, not for you, but for the people who depended on it. And you threw it back in my face." Stephen looked away, shame etching his features. Diane's voice trembled. "I was wrong, Natalie. I was jealous, stupid. Please, give us another chance." Her words echoed Dad's plea, but they couldn't erase the years of disdain. I thought of Linda, how she'd taught me to stand tall, to value dignity over pride. Diane's collapse was her own doing, built on arrogance I'd once overlooked. I'd carried her weight for too long, sacrificing my own peace. "Look down at the floor," I said, my voice low, echoing her cruel taunt from the party. Diane flinched, her eyes wide, while Stephen froze. "That's where you wanted me," I continued. "But I'm done letting you walk over me." Dad's shoulders sagged, his hope fading, but I couldn't bend, not this time. Diane's tears fell, but I felt no urge to comfort her. "I'm not reinvesting," I said firmly. "You'll have to face the consequences of your choices." Stephen opened his mouth, then closed it, defeated. Dad reached for my hand, his voice breaking. "Natalie, I just want us to be a family again." I squeezed his hand, my heart aching. "I love you, Dad, but family doesn't mean letting someone tear you down." He nodded, tears in his eyes, understanding but grieving. As they left, Diane's steps were slow, Stephen trailing behind her. Dad lingered at the door, his face etched with sorrow. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, then followed them out. I shut the door, the silence settling around me. I thought of Linda again, her lessons about strength and self-respect. Diane's fall wasn't my victory. It was a reminder that pride could destroy even the strongest foundations. I'd chosen my dignity, and that was enough. I sat at my desk, opening my laptop to start a new project.
I stood before the meal I had spent hours preparing, completely speechless. Why would my brother-in-law's wife treat me so cruelly? I couldn't understand it. My name is Aurora, a 27-year-old office worker. My family consists of my husband, Chase, and our 3-year-old son. Chase is 4 years older than me, and our relationship began when I worked under him at the same company. After going out for drinks a few times, we grew close and started dating. A year later, we got married, bought a home, and began building our future together, enjoying our happy days as a family. But that happiness was overshadowed by a problem: Audrielle's wife, Delilah. Audrielle is Chase's older brother. When they were young, Their father passed away in an accident, leaving their mother devastated. She had been a housewife, and the shock of losing her husband sent her into depression. Though she eventually recovered enough to take on a part-time job, she couldn't fully support the family. At the time, Adriel was in college, but he dropped out to work and provide for the family. He always insisted, Chase needs to go to college properly, and never complained as he worked tirelessly. Thanks to Adriel's sacrifices and some scholarships, Chase was able to complete his education and secure a stable job. At our wedding, both Adriel and their mother expressed their heartfelt gratitude. Overcome with emotion, Chase told Adriel, "If you weren't my brother, I wouldn't be where I am today." Adriel had always been kind and thoughtful toward us. However, after we moved into a house near his family, Delilah took every opportunity to remind me to be grateful to her husband. Adriel's job kept him busy with long hours and frequent business trips. During those times, Delilah would drop by our house unannounced, sometimes to eat, sometimes to bathe her children, and often to leave them with me while she went home to relax. She made unreasonable demands, too. "I don't feel like eating Western food today. Make something Japanese instead." Or, "My child wants hamburger steak tonight, so please cook it." Chase and I felt obligated to comply because we were indebted to Adriel. Once, when Chase gently pointed out that she was relying on me too much, Delilah snapped, "Because of Adriel, you got to go to college and land a prestigious job. Meanwhile, he only has a high school diploma and struggles in his career. If he had been able to finish college, he would have had better opportunities." She continued, "That's why you could buy a brand new house while we had to settle for a used one. The least you can do is repay him by doing these small favors for us." Whenever she said things like this, Chase would fall silent, unable to argue. He didn't want to bring up all the sacrifices Adriel had made for him, so he turned to me and pleaded, "I'm sorry, but can you put up with Delilah? We owe my brother so much." Reluctantly, I agreed, but Delilah's demands only grew worse. Her visits boiled down to two main reasons: she wanted to eat or use our bathroom, but recently, she started using me to impress her relatives. One day, she said, "I'm hosting dinner for my relatives and want to serve them a homemade meal." At first, I assumed she was inviting me to join the gathering, but once I finished cooking, she abruptly dismissed me. "All right, our guests will be here soon. You should go home now." Later, I overheard her relatives praising her, saying how talented she was for preparing such an elaborate meal. This wasn't a one-time thing. Every time Delilah had guests over, she had me cook, then sent me away. I chose the dishes, bought the ingredients with my own money, and prepared everything from scratch, while she didn't even lift a finger. On top of that, I was responsible for sending gifts on behalf of Adriel's family to his bosses and relatives as tokens of appreciation. I took care of everything, yet Delilah received all the praise. At family gatherings, people would tell me, "You should learn from Delilah, she's such a considerate and capable wife." I had lost count of how many times she boasted, "I prepare everything myself." Eventually, Chase and I told her that if we were to continue handling these gifts, she should at least cover the costs. After all, we also had our own relatives to send gifts to, and the expense was becoming too much. But Delilah refused to listen. "It's nothing compared to what Adriel sacrificed for you," she told Chase. She even scolded me, saying, "Adriel doesn't need to know about this. He'd be shocked to hear that you're making such a big deal out of a small gesture of gratitude. A good wife helps her husband repay his debts of kindness. Any woman who doesn't is the worst." Delilah constantly used Adriel's sacrifices as leverage to make demands. We were responsible for all seasonal letters, New Year's cards, and mid-year and year-end gifts. Lately, she had taken to repeating the phrase, "Chase is only successful because of Adriel," as if it were some kind of mantra. Then came the breaking point. Delilah asked me to prepare a full meal for a dinner party at her house, where she was hosting about 20 relatives. Normally, these family gatherings took place at the home of a senior relative, but this time, Delilah volunteered. Her relatives were excited. After all, they believed she was an excellent cook. But in reality, she expected me to do all the work. Chase was busy that day, so he couldn't help. When I asked about the cost, Delilah expected us to pay for everything. Feeding 20 people wasn't cheap, and I told her we should at least split the bill, but as usual, she refused. After everything Adriel went through, "This is the least we can do," she insisted. When I suggested discussing it with Adriel, she erupted in anger. "Don't you dare bother him, he's busy with work. How ungrateful can you be?" I was at my limit, but with the dinner party approaching, I had no choice but to start preparing. Over several days, I carefully planned and cooked everything. The day finally arrived. I had been working since early morning and had just finished setting everything up when Delilah appeared. "Everything is ready," I told her, exhausted but relieved. "Your relatives can arrive anytime now." She scanned the dishes and suddenly scowled. "What is this? The main dish is supposed to be eel rice." I blinked. "But you never told me that." "You should have known. This is so embarrassing. My relatives will think I don't even know how to prepare eel rice. Order some right away." I took a deep breath, looking at the fresh seafood I had carefully selected and prepared. This time, I wasn't going to back down. I stood my ground, refusing to back down. "I didn't make anything embarrassing," I replied firmly. Delilah, however, was relentless. "It has to be eel rice," she insisted, demanding I order it immediately, at my own expense. When I asked her to cover the cost, she flat out refused. That was the final straw. "Enough," I snapped. "Every time your relatives visit, you make me cook. You drop by our house unannounced, taking advantage of us. We handle all the mid-year and year-end gifts for your family. And for what?" My frustration spilled out. "I'm sick of it." She scoffed. "After everything Adrielle has done for you, you should be grateful." I took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "Delilah, I know about your affair." Her smirk faltered. "You spend your days pawning off your responsibilities on me, so I got curious. I did some digging, and I know you've been sneaking around with someone you met on a dating app." For a second, she was silent, then, she laughed. "Oh, so you found out," she said casually, "but you don't have proof." "It doesn't matter. You've been helping me all this time. It's like you're repaying a debt. That's what really matters." Her arrogance was staggering. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I silently packed up the food I had prepared. "I'm done," I told her, gathering my belongings. "I'm never coming back." As I walked out the door, she was still yelling about eel rice. I ignored her. Hours later, my phone buzzed with her repeated calls. I finally picked up. "What the hell is going on?" she screeched, sounding frantic. "Something wrong?" I asked innocently. "Everything's ruined," she ranted. "I threw away the food you made and ordered eel rice, just like I said. I even paid for it with my own money, but guess what? None of my relatives showed up. They suddenly cancelled at the last minute. How do they know everything?" I couldn't help but laugh. Unbeknownst to Delilah, I had already spoken to Adrielle. I couldn't let her manipulation continue, so I told him everything, how she had been using us, lying to him, and even cheating. At first, he was skeptical. After all, Delilah had always played the role of the perfect wife around him and his relatives. She made sure he came home to a warm meal every night, meals she prepared using groceries stolen from my kitchen. She claimed she was the one sending gifts on behalf of their family, even though I was the one handling everything. She even lied, saying she often invited us over for dinner, but kept it a secret to avoid troubling us. Adrielle had believed every word. But I had proof. I recorded Delilah's conversations whenever she visited, capturing her entitled demands and her repeated claims that we owed her. I also recorded our final confrontation, including her confession about the affair. And most importantly, I made sure Adrielle and her relatives were listening. The moment the truth came out, Delilah's world crumbled. Her relatives, furious, bombarded her with calls. "I can't believe Aurora was the one handling all the gifts. You used Adrielle's sacrifices as an excuse to manipulate people. And on top of that, you cheated?" One by one, they cut ties with her. Delilah tried to worm her way out of it, but the evidence was undeniable. That night, Adrielle came home early. He faced Delilah with a look of deep disappointment. "How could you treat Chase and Aurora like this while I wasn't around?" His voice was low, controlled. "And you had an affair?" Delilah broke down, sobbing. "I was jealous," she admitted. "I hated that Aurora was younger, that she and Chase had a better house than us. I wanted to make them owe us, and when Chase thanked you at the wedding, I realized I could use that against them. As for the affair, I was lonely. You're always busy with work. I wanted attention." Her excuses disgusted me, but more than anything, I felt sorry for Adrielle. "I never helped Chase expecting him to repay me," he said, shaking his head. "He's my brother. I wanted him to have a good life, and I'm proud of what he's achieved. If my salary isn't enough for you, that's my failure, not his." Then we learned the worst part. Delilah had been leaving her kids alone while sneaking off to meet her lover. Adriel made his decision. He filed for divorce and took full custody of the children. Delilah, desperate to avoid a court battle, accepted a lower alimony in exchange for a clean break. But karma had more in store for her. Her lover's wife found out about the affair and demanded compensation. Now, Delilah was drowning in debt, working multiple part-time jobs to pay alimony and child support. Months later, when Adriel stopped by with his kids, I caught a glimpse of her from a distance. She looked exhausted and disheveled. Adriel, always the good man, apologized to us. He even offered to pay for the meals Delilah had taken from our home and the gifts we had covered over the years. But Chase and I refused. We just wanted to put it all behind us. I told Adriel I felt guilty, like I had brought shame to his family. He shook his head. If anything, I was the one who failed, because I never noticed what she was doing. Now, he's balancing work and raising his kids. We help when we can, and he joins us for dinner sometimes. As for Delilah, she's out of our lives. Looking back, I realize that if she hadn't constantly played the "you owe Adriel" card, maybe we could have had a normal relationship. But some people will always try to make you feel indebted to them, even when you don't owe them a thing. Chase and I laugh about it now. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Stay tuned. I cook for him. I clean up after him. How is that a waste of money? My sister-in-law snapped, her voice shaking with frustration. Hand over Grandpa's pension records and bank books. You've been using his money without his consent, haven't you? I demanded, my tone cutting through her excuses like a knife. The way you've treated him is beyond unacceptable. If we take this footage to the authorities, you'll be in serious trouble. My husband chimed in, his voice laced with warning. My sister-in-law and brother had no idea their lives were about to be turned upside down. My name is Harper. I'm 32 years old and work in an office. I've been married to my husband, Joseph, for 3 years. We live in his family home, though both of his parents have passed away. His father died before we got married, and his mother passed away last year. When I first moved in, Joseph's mother was already in poor health and had been hospitalized. She was granted temporary leave to attend our wedding, but shortly after, she passed away peacefully, surrounded by her loved ones. Being an only child, losing his mother left Joseph feeling completely alone. At the time, he fell into a deep sadness. I had already lost both of my parents, but I still had my brother, Gabriel, and our grandfather, who was still with us. Right now, my grandfather lives with Gabriel. My husband and I visit him occasionally, and Joseph enjoys chatting with him. Even though they aren't related by blood, my husband values my grandfather's wisdom and company. At 80-something, Grandpa is still physically strong, but his memory has started to fade. I worry about the possibility of dementia. Sometimes he drifts into old memories or brings up unrelated topics, which makes me anxious, but my husband finds these moments endearing. The other day, while talking to my husband, Grandpa suddenly became upset. Maybe he mistook him for Gabriel. You're mocking me and acting like a horrible grandson, he snapped. Joseph, staying calm, apologized as if he really were Gabriel. I'm sorry, Grandpa, he said gently, trying to ease his frustration. A moment later, Grandpa seemed to realize his mistake and looked embarrassed. Oh, you're Harper's husband, aren't you? I got confused, he admitted. Joseph continued the conversation as if nothing had happened, but I was unsettled by the way Grandpa had spoken about Gabriel. When I confronted my brother about it, he became defensive. You left me to take care of him, and now you're criticizing me? Gabriel shot back angrily. The truth is, we never forced him to look after Grandpa. After our parents died, he and his wife moved into our family home, where Grandpa was already living. It seemed like a mutual decision, especially since Gabriel and his wife, Oakland, appeared willing to care for him. Oakland, in particular, had always seemed warm and attentive when I visited. But Joseph had his doubts. Are you sure she's taking care of him properly? He asked me one day. His clothes are dirty, and there's dust all over his room. My husband is extremely observant, and he was convinced that Oakland was neglecting Grandpa. He had even caught her berating Gabriel during a family gathering. Make sure you tell them not to come during the holidays, she had snapped at him. I just want some peace and quiet. I had already sensed her two-faced nature the previous winter when Grandpa was hospitalized with a cold. One day, while visiting, I overheard her speaking when she didn't realize I was there. I wish he'd just hurry up and die already, she muttered under her breath. When she saw me, her face turned pale, and she immediately switched to a sweet tone, trying to change the subject, but I knew what I had heard. Despite my suspicions, I never voiced them openly. When we visited, we kept our thoughts to ourselves, knowing that in such a small house, anything we said would reach their ears. Then one day, Grandpa himself finally admitted the truth. That's when Joseph came up with an idea. What if we install a pet camera to monitor what's really going on? He suggested. At first, I hesitated. Spying on my own family felt wrong, but for Grandpa's sake, we discreetly set up the camera in his room. The footage confirmed our worst fears. Gabriel and Oakland had a 5-year-old son, Leon, and even he treated Grandpa horribly. The moment he got home from kindergarten, he would barge into the room and shout, "Hey, old man, still alive?" His disrespect was shocking. A child that young could only have learned such behavior from his parents. I wanted to confront him right away, but what I saw next was even worse. Oakland entered Grandpa's room, looking like a completely different person from the kind woman I thought I knew. She glared at him with a terrifying expression. "I told you to do your own laundry, didn't I? Why is it still not done?" she yelled. Grandpa had always told me that Oakland did his laundry, but now I realized she had been making him do it himself. He kept apologizing, his head bowed, but she continued berating him. "As punishment, you'll be doing everyone's laundry tomorrow," she declared, "and don't you dare mix yours with ours." Joseph, watching the footage with me, clenched his fists in anger. "This is worse than I imagined. We need to get Grandpa out of there. Let's bring him to live with us." I was relieved to see my husband so outraged on Grandpa's behalf, but the cruelty didn't stop there. When dinner time came, Oakland brought Grandpa a meal, just a small bowl of rice and miso soup, and shoved it onto his table. "Eat fast and bring the tray back yourself," she barked. I watched in horror as Grandpa ate alone in his room, excluded from the family. Tears welled up in my eyes. The next day, Joseph and I confronted Gabriel. "We want to take Grandpa to live with us," I told him firmly. "You've already said you don't want the responsibility." Gabriel looked conflicted, but before he could answer, Oakland stepped in. "That's not happening," she said coldly. "He stays here. This is his home." I couldn't understand why she insisted on keeping him when she clearly saw him as a burden, until Grandpa revealed the real reason. "I can't leave," he murmured. "They took my pension book and bank records. I don't have any money." Everything clicked into place. Oakland didn't care about Grandpa, she cared about his pension. I turned to her, my anger boiling over. "Give back his bank book and pension records," I demanded. "You've been taking his money, haven't you?" For the first time, she dropped the fake kindness and glared at me with pure hatred. "I feed him and clean up after him," she hissed. "That's not stealing." But I wasn't going to back down. Grandpa deserved better, and I was going to make sure he got it. "So, I'm just using his pension for household expenses. That's not stealing. It's unfair of you to accuse me of that," Oakland protested, her voice laced with indignation. My husband didn't let her words slide. He pulled out his phone, revealing the secretly recorded footage from my grandfather's room, and spoke in a firm tone. "The way you've been treating him is disgraceful. If we take this video to the authorities or the police, you'll be in serious trouble," he warned. Oakland's defiance wavered instantly. The threat clearly rattled her, and she fell silent. Gabriel, who had always been under her influence, could no longer argue in the face of undeniable proof. With no other choice, he reluctantly agreed to let us take our grandfather with us. As we packed up Grandpa's things, Oakland, still bitter about losing control over his pension, made a snide remark. "Poor Grandpa, now Harper's going to take all his money instead." I shot back without hesitation. "So you're admitting you've been using his pension all this time? In that case, you should return every cent to him." Realizing she had exposed herself, Oakland clamped her mouth shut and stormed off. Meanwhile, my image-conscious brother desperately pleaded with my husband to delete the video. I had already decided to erase it. Grandpa's dignity mattered more than revenge. Turning to my grandfather, I gently urged, "Grandpa, let's move in with us. You don't have to stay here anymore." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Once we retrieved his pension book and bank records, Grandpa officially moved in with us. From the moment he arrived, he seemed like a new person. His expression brightened, and his mind became clearer. His forgetfulness, which had worried me before, noticeably faded. Back at Gabriel's house, he had barely gone outside, but now, every morning, he took walks, enjoying the fresh air and his newfound freedom. Strangely enough, ever since Grandpa came to live with us, good things kept happening. My husband received a promotion at work, and I won a small lottery prize, not a fortune, just $100, but it still felt like a sign of positive change. Then came an even bigger surprise. Grandpa's long-lost brother, Mike, had passed away, though they hadn't spoken in over 50 years. Grandpa was his only surviving relative, making him the sole heir to Mike's massive fortune. Mike had built a successful business but had no wife or children, so he left behind a staggering $2 million inheritance. While Grandpa remained composed about it, I couldn't help but dream about all the things we could do: trips, shopping, maybe even a new house. My husband, noticing my excitement, gave me a look. "It's not our money," he reminded me. "This is your grandfather's inheritance. He gets to decide what to do with it." His words brought me back down to reality, but nothing could have prepared me for Grandpa's decision. "I'm going to donate it," he announced calmly. He explained that Mike had always wanted to donate his wealth but never left a will. Since Grandpa had inherited everything, he felt it was right to fulfill his brother's wishes. He decided to give the entire sum to the local government, and the generous act quickly became a hot topic in town. Even though Grandpa had hoped to make the donation quietly, the media caught wind of it. A public ceremony was arranged, and reporters would be attending. Grandpa, and used to such attention, grew nervous about the event. On the day of the ceremony, my husband and I had to work, so we couldn't be there, but we encouraged Grandpa before leaving the house. Later, during my lunch break, I turned on the local news. The live broadcast showed my grandfather standing stiffly on stage, visibly uncomfortable but determined. He was supposed to simply hand over the donation and conclude the event, but suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The crowd stirred, and then a familiar voice screeched through the hall. "That money belongs to me." I froze. The camera caught a glimpse of two figures rushing onto the stage, Gabriel and Oakland. Before I could see more, the broadcast was abruptly cut off. My coworker, watching with me, chuckled. "Wow, what a scene! That was a disaster for the news station." But I couldn't laugh. A sinking feeling grew in my stomach. How had they even known about the inheritance? I spent the rest of my shift distracted, eager to get home and find out what happened. When I finally arrived, Grandpa greeted me with a cheerful smile, as if nothing unusual had occurred. "Grandpa," I said urgently, "did Gabriel and Oakland show up at the donation ceremony today?" He blinked in surprise. "Yeah, how did you know?" "They barged in and caused a huge commotion, screaming about the money. Security had to drag them out." He chuckled as if it was all a minor inconvenience. Hearing him say it so casually, I couldn't help but laugh, too. I figured being forcibly removed by security would be enough humiliation to make them back off. But when my husband got home, his expression was serious. "You need to see this," he said, handing me his phone. Online, images from the ceremony had gone viral, though their faces were blurred. The headlines were brutal. "Greedy grandchildren try to stop grandfather's generous donation." Since Grandpa's name was public, people quickly figured out who the culprits were. Within hours, Gabriel and Oakland's faces, home address, and even workplace details were exposed. The internet had torn them apart. It turned out that a lawyer had initially gone to their home, still thinking Grandpa lived there. He hadn't mentioned the inheritance, but once the media started covering the donation, Gabriel put the pieces together, and Oakland saw an opportunity. They had stormed the ceremony in a last-ditch effort to claim the money, only to become infamous for their greed. Now, their entire lives were crumbling. Gabriel, already disliked at work, faced immense ridicule and soon quit. Their son's kindergarten parents shunned them, forcing Oakland to withdraw him. They tried to hide at her parents' house, but even that location was discovered. Eventually, Gabriel called me in desperation. "Please, Harper," he pleaded, "you have to help us." But I felt no sympathy. "You did this to yourself," I told him coldly. "If you had treated Grandpa with kindness from the start, none of this would have happened." I ended the call, and that was the last I heard from him. Shortly after, Gabriel and Oakland divorced. Most of the money from selling their house went to child support. Oakland struggled to find work, her face was now too well known, and she had no qualifications. She ended up living in hiding at her parents' house, unable to show her face in public. Meanwhile, our lives only got better. With the inheritance drama behind us, I found out I was pregnant. Grandpa and my husband were overjoyed, and Grandpa became more determined than ever to stay active and healthy, taking walks every day in preparation for meeting his great-grandchild. One evening, my husband grinned and said, "Ever since Grandpa moved in, only good things have happened. Maybe he's our good luck charm." I laughed. "You might be right." And just like that, our family's new chapter began, one filled with happiness, peace, and a newfound appreciation for the people who truly mattered. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Stay tuned. Mom, don't worry, it's just regular pasta, my son reassured me as his wife set a plate in front of me. Eat up, my daughter-in-law said with a sharp tone, her voice cutting through the air. But as I stirred the food, the odd smell grew stronger, and I couldn't bring myself to take a bite. Just then, Kinsley's phone rang loudly from her bag. With a quick glance at us, she snatched it up and rushed out of the room to take the call. Maybe we should swap plates without anyone noticing, I whispered, trying to mask my unease. My son gave a small smile and nodded, diving into his second serving, but the next moment, he collapsed backward, clutching his throat, gasping for breath, and convulsing on the floor, foam bubbling from his mouth. In a panic, I screamed, "What's going on?" I'm Sienna, 62 years old. After my son Dustin married, it was just my husband and I left in our quiet home. One day, as we were chatting about his new married life, Dustin suddenly looked uneasy and brought up something unexpected. Mom, the truth is, my wife's cooking isn't all that great, he said with hesitation. What are you talking about? You should be grateful someone's cooking for you, I chided him lightly. I am grateful, but I just can't bring myself to eat it, he said, genuinely troubled. I was taken aback. Dustin had always been easygoing with food, even as an adult. It felt strange to hear him say that. Well, then come have dinner with us sometime, I suggested casually. Really? Thanks, Mom, Dustin said, his face lighting up. Seeing his excitement, I thought that maybe it wouldn't be so bad to spend time together. I made the offer hoping to connect better with Dustin's wife, Kinsley. However, Kinsley's behavior turned out to be far beyond what I imagined, and completely outrageous. A few days after our conversation, the couple came over for dinner. My husband and I had a pleasant time with them at the table, no issues at all. I hope this suits you, Kinsley, I said politely. It's delicious, she answered with a smile. I'm glad to hear that, thank you, I replied, smiling back. Dustin always says how great your cooking is. I'm jealous to have such a talented cook for a mother-in-law, Kinsley added, causing me to blush a little. She then said, I made something for you as a gift. She placed a large container in the middle of the table. Kinsley, what did you make? I asked, curious. It's a French dish called quiche, you've heard of it, right? She said confidently. She opened the container to reveal a mixture that looked like a cross between an omelette and a pie. The moment it was uncovered, a terrible smell hit the air, making me recoil slightly. The surface was burnt, and the inside was undercooked and gooey, with a strange fishy odor. You just mix the dough and bake it, so it's pretty easy, she added casually. Should we heat it up again? I suggested politely, trying to keep the situation pleasant. It's fine even cold, she replied dismissively. Reluctantly, I picked up my chopsticks and took a bite. The dough was undercooked and powdery, making me hesitate. My husband put his chopsticks down without tasting it, and Dustin didn't say a word or try it either. Oddly, Kinsley didn't try it either. Aren't you eating, Mother? She asked, frowning. I'm sorry, but it seems undercooked. Could we maybe heat it up again? I said cautiously. Her expression darkened, and she sighed in frustration. Forget it, she snapped, slamming the container onto the table. I never thought I'd be treated like this just for bringing food. Do you think being good at cooking means you can act however you want? Kinsley, please calm down, Dustin said, trying to defuse the tension. Before you complain to Mom, why don't you at least try it? It's so easy to make, I don't need to taste it, she retorted. Why aren't you eating it then? How can you serve food without even tasting it? Try it, Dustin insisted. I never intended to upset anyone, but somehow, I ended up looking rude. I tried to calm things down while they argued, but Kinsley stayed upset and laughed bitterly. Dustin apologized and left to follow her. In the quiet room, I held my head in my hands. At this rate, she'll think I'm trying to make things hard for her, I sighed, looking at my husband. Staring at the leftover food, I wondered what to do next. I wasn't a gourmet cook, just average. I didn't want to make the situation worse, but I also didn't want to cause more tension. I could suggest Dustin cook for himself, but that might hurt Kinsley's pride. As much as he's my son, it wasn't my place to meddle in their household. After talking with my husband, we decided to stay out of it, but ever since, Kinsley had been showing up at our house regularly for some reason. Mom, could you make lunch and pack dinner for Dustin? She asked one day out of the blue. The next day, she came over alone, spreading empty containers across the table and asking, Could you make lunch and dinner for me and Dustin? Surprised, I asked, is something wrong? My husband seems to prefer your cooking, so I thought you could cook our meals from now on, she said bluntly. That's a problem, Kinsley, how about we cook together? I suggested. No, she snapped, her tone sharp, you'll just make that face again, you're just making it difficult for me. I was speechless at her insistence. No matter how I explained myself, she had decided I was a difficult mother-in-law. Although cooking wasn't a big deal, it became unbearable to do it every day for someone who clearly disliked me. I considered teaching her a few basic recipes, but she wouldn't even entertain the idea. You're good at cooking, so just make it for us, and please take care of tomorrow's meal too, Kinsley demanded, growing bolder. Despite my attempts to persuade her, she became more demanding as time went on. On days when I refused, she seemed to buy prepared food from the store. Dustin seemed okay with that, and didn't say anything, but Kinsley began to complain. Eventually, she insisted, you should be making my husband's lunch and delivering it every morning. This left me deeply troubled. In the end, another argument arose when Kinsley discovered that Dustin was giving me money to cover the food costs. After more discussions, I decided not to cook for them anymore. Weeks later, Kinsley came back with Dustin. I want you to teach me how to cook, Kinsley admitted. Finally, she agreed to listen. Please, just this once, Dustin added. Well, if that's the case, I'll help her, I said, relieved that the situation seemed to be heading toward a peaceful resolution. I led them into the kitchen, where Kinsley, looking more determined than ever, announced that she had brought her own ingredients. However, the moment I tried to assist, she swiftly shut me out. I need to be alone to concentrate, she insisted, firmly pushing both Dustin and me out of the room. Left with no choice, we waited anxiously in the living room. Surprisingly soon after, Kinsley reappeared, proudly presenting a plate of pasta. The short time it had taken to prepare raised my suspicions, and I attempted to peek into the kitchen, but before I could step inside, Kinsley blocked my path. Mother, what's wrong? Here, try it while it's still warm, she urged, her tone carrying a hint of nervousness. Are you sure everything's okay? Were you able to find all the pots and utensils? I asked, trying to mask my concern. Everything is fine, just try my homemade pasta while it's fresh, she responded with an uneasy smile. At first glance, the creamy pasta looked far better than her previous attempts. However, as I stirred it with my fork, I noticed unusual specks in the white sauce. Initially, I assumed they were remnants of roux, but a strange, overpowering scent wafted up, something that smelled like air freshener. Dustin, eager to encourage her, took a bite. This is delicious, he exclaimed in surprise. Wow, Kinsley, you've really improved. I always cook properly, Kinsley replied smugly, glancing at me. Even my mother-in-law wouldn't refuse this, right? Mom, it's fine, it's just regular pasta, Dustin reassured me. Usually, Kinsley would react angrily to Dustin's casual remarks about her cooking, but this time, she simply pressed, eat quickly. The more I stirred the dish, the stronger the unusual scent became, making me hesitate. Why won't you eat? She suddenly snapped. You're just trying to make me look bad, aren't you? That's not it, I protested. Before I could say more, Kinsley's phone rang from inside her bag. She quickly grabbed it and rushed out of the room to take the call. Seizing the moment, I leaned toward Dustin and whispered, "Can we swap plates without her noticing?" Dustin nodded, taking my plate as his second helping, but the moment he took a few bites, his expression twisted in agony, his body convulsed, his hands clutching at his throat as foam started forming at his mouth. Then, he collapsed backward onto the floor. I screamed in panic. "What's happening, Dustin?" Hearing my cries, Kinsley hurried back into the room. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw her husband convulsing on the floor. I frantically dialed for an ambulance while she knelt beside him, her face filled with confusion. "What happened to Dustin?" she demanded, her voice shaking. At the hospital, after having his stomach pumped, Dustin was finally stable. My husband and I sighed in relief, but before we could even process everything, Kinsley stood before us, her face pale. "Why?" she muttered under her breath. It was the same question she had asked when Dustin collapsed. "What do you mean, why?" I asked cautiously. "How did this happen? Why, Dustin, how could this happen?" she repeated, more frantically this time. "Kinsley, please calm down," I urged, but what she said next sent a chill down my spine. "It should have been you," she blurted out. "Did you force Dustin to eat it?" My husband's face darkened. What did you do, Kinsley? She let out a bitter laugh. You insulted my cooking. I just wanted to teach you a lesson. My heart pounded. What do you mean, teach me a lesson? It's your fault Dustin won't eat my food. He's always on your side, she accused, her voice laced with resentment. Dustin and I had never intended to hurt her feelings, but clearly, she had taken things to an extreme. So, you deliberately put something in my food? I asked, horrified. Kinsley smirked. If you weren't around, everything would be peaceful. The room fell into stunned silence. It turned out that the foreign substance in the pasta was detergent. Thankfully, Dustin survived without severe harm, but the situation could have been much worse. I shook my head in disbelief. If you wanted me gone, all you had to do was improve your cooking. Kinsley's expression twisted. But as long as you're alive, Dustin will always side with you. Her complete lack of remorse made my stomach churn. My husband, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke in a firm voice. That's enough, Kinsley, we need to talk to your parents about this. Kinsley paled. No, my parents have nothing to do with this. Because talking to you isn't getting us anywhere, I interjected. After Dustin was discharged, we arranged a meeting with Kinsley's parents. Her mother, Sadie, arrived first and bowed deeply in apology. I am terribly sorry for the trouble my daughter has caused you, she said sincerely. Oh, there's no need for, Dustin began, but Kinsley cut him off. That's right, it's my mother-in-law who should apologize, she snapped. Each time she spoke, Sadie's stern glare silenced her. There was something unsettling about the way her mother handled her. We will cover all medical expenses, Sadie promised, and if there's anything else we can do, please let us know. I'm not paying anything, Kinsley protested. Kinsley, can you at least tell me why you did this? I asked, giving her one last chance. Like I said, it's because Dustin always takes your side, she shouted. I let out a weary sigh. She still blamed me entirely. I had to put an end to this. I pulled out my phone and showed Sadie a photo. What is this? She asked. A dish Kinsley once brought to our house, I explained. She called it quiche. Sadie's eyes widened in horror. You served something like this to someone else? She demanded, her voice trembling. It was then that I learned the shocking truth. Kinsley's parents were professional chefs. She had rebelled against their strict upbringing and, after getting married, disregarded any culinary standards. Realizing she could no longer justify her actions, Kinsley finally confessed. I thought if I could get my mother-in-law hospitalized, I wouldn't have to deal with her anymore, she admitted. Her twisted logic made my head spin. I can't stay married to someone who would do this to my mother, Dustin said firmly. Why not? It's not my fault, Kinsley shouted. You should have just taken my side. Sadie had had enough. Be quiet. Kinsley, you could be arrested for this. Hearing the word arrested, Kinsley turned ashen. Although there were some disputes over compensation, her parents ensured she paid for the medical bills. We chose not to involve the police, but the damage had already been done. Later, I found out that Kinsley's father, furious at her disgraceful actions, had taken her back home. He was now putting her through rigorous culinary training, forcing her to learn the basics from scratch. As for Dustin, he decided to take responsibility for his own meals. Inspired by everything that had happened, my husband also became interested in cooking, and now, the three of us often cook together. Sometimes, I even sit back and let them take charge, enjoying the rare moments of peace in my kitchen. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Stay tuned.